Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the original Sony ZV1 versus the ZV1 Mark II that just came out. The ZV1 was released in 2020 and this one was released just today. So we're going to be talking about the differences and if you should be upgrading or which one you should purchase if you own neither. The Sony ZV1 is currently $749. That's the one from 2020. The Mark II is starting at $899 and you'll be able to get that in a month or so. However, that $150, sure, there's some justification for the price increase, but I would probably recommend, if you really want a ZV1 camera, checking your local listings on the used market, because I found one for about $500, $550 US dollars this morning. Came with 3 batteries, a cage, and it was in great condition, so that might be a good route. If you've also been looking at the Sony ZV-1F, I would recommend actually steering clear of that camera just because the autofocus isn't great and it can't shoot raw photos as well. So we're going to be talking about 5 things that are different in the Sony ZV-1 Mark II, and then we're going to be talking about things that remained the same between the Sony ZV-1 that was released in 2020. And then at the end, I'm going to be giving a recommendation for who should be picking up which one of these cameras. First, let's start with lens, because this is obviously the biggest change to the camera. Creators wanted a wider focal length and Sony delivered on that. However, there were some compromises within that lens change. Remember, these cameras are fixed lens cameras. So the Mark II has an 18 to 50 focal length, where the Sony ZV-1 from 2020 has a 24 to 70 millimeter focal length. Now that's all fine and good because I'm happier on a vlogging camera to have wider than a longer end, so I lose that 50 to 70 millimeter focal range on the Mark II. Not overly concerned with that, but I am concerned with the aperture change. So it's now a variable aperture. It used to be 1.8 to 2.8 for the variable aperture, which is actually manageable for a camera like this. But now it's shifted from 1.8 on the low end to the 50 millimeter range having an f4 variable aperture, which isn't great on a 1-inch sensor. If you're finding value in this video, it goes a really long way if you could just leave a like. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, and let's dive back in. And I typically don't get too technical on this channel, but you gotta remember that there's a 3 times crop factor when thinking about aperture. So a 1.8 aperture on a 1-inch sensor actually gives you that background out of focus look of about a 4.2 full frame sensor. And then because this new Mark II goes all the way to f4, that would be equivalent to a full frame f12, and good luck getting an out of focus background on a 1-inch sensor at f12. Another downgrade to this new lens for me is that it's not stabilized, whereas the Sony ZV-1 actually had a stabilized lens on the camera, and then you could do like stabilization in body from there as well. Okay, so Sony upgraded the microphone as well. On the ZV-1 from 2020, it was really good, but now it's omnidirectional, or you can choose to have it just record from behind. So like I'm talking, but I'm filming something, the audio can point in my direction behind the camera, or you can have it front facing as well if you're sitting there vlogging. Number 3 is USB-C. So they did change this from the Sony ZV-1. The ZV-1F did have a USB-C, but this is gonna be really nice to have on the Mark II, because then if you need to charge on the go, it's gonna be super fast and convenient. You can just plug it into a portable charger and be on your way. There are some new features on the Mark II that might help some creators. I personally don't like editing my colors or cinematic borders within camera. If I wanted to do that, I would simply do it in post. So for me, this is not a big deal, but for beginner cinematic vloggers, I guess it could help. That's 5, but I'll give you one more bonus difference, is that now the quarter 20 is a little bit offset. So if you're putting it on a tripod, it's not blocking the battery door like it was on the Sony ZV-1. Okay, now let's move to what's the same about these two cameras. Like I mentioned or kind of alluded to before, I was super excited about the launch of this camera. I was expecting more from the Mark II. So let's talk about what's the same and why I'm a little unenthused with this release. So 3 years later, after the release of the Mark I, we still have that 3-inch LCD screen, still has some touch capabilities, and then it's 921K dots, so it's the same resolution and you're not getting like a better quality LCD screen, which is kind of a big deal because these cameras don't have viewfinders. Number 2, resolutions. Nothing has changed here. Still shoots 4K 30, 1080p, 120 frames per second. I was expecting and hoping for at least 4K 60. but we didn't get that. Number 3 is internal NDs. We still have the exact same internal NDs. There's no added stops of NDs. That would have been nice because then we could just go higher on the NDs and that would allow us for a lower aperture, but we didn't get that either. It's still the same 20 megapixel sensor that we saw in the ZV1 and ZV1F. Still 8-bit color, can still shoot raw photos. The size is almost identical. I think it's maybe 2 grams off, but it's gonna feel exactly the same in the hand. These things are compact and fun and easy to travel with, but yeah, nothing has changed there. Both these cameras are pretty good. I was just expecting more from like 3 years later after listening to creators. I thought they could probably cook up something a little bit better in that Sony kitchen, but I didn't see it this time around. Phones are getting pretty good these days, and that's kind of the target demographic of this line of camera, the ZV line. But anyways, I just overall wasn't enthused, won't be pre-ordering this camera. I'll probably wait for maybe like the A6700 or the A7C II for a B camera this year. A few drawbacks of these Sony ZV1 cameras are they don't have viewfinders, 8-bit color, variable aperture, no 4K 60, 1-inch sensors. They dim in the outdoors, so it's kind of hard to see for video when you're recording. And then last thing is that they only shoot 720p for streaming video.